Hello, and welcome to Zap the Gender Pay Gap, the podcast series where we expose the elephant in the room. The elephant's name, the gender pay gap. I am coming to you from Memphis, Tennessee, located on the banks of the mighty Mississippi River. Nestled in the southwest corner of the state, Memphis is home to the blues, barbecue, and so much more. I am your host, Gwendolyn Tucker.
Thank you so very much for joining me for this episode of Zap the Gender Pay Gap. I am your host, Gwendolyn Tucker. You can find Zap the Gender Pay Gap on Apple, Spotify, and Google. So please feel free to join me wherever you find your favorite podcast. Now, if you've been listening during the month of May, you know that May is International Victorious Women Month. And for the entire month, my focus has been calling for women who are ready to get the victory over this elephant in the room, who is sticking its trunk into a woman's paycheck every single payday and stealing away 18% or more of her pay. Now, the gender pay gap has existed forever. And although the female to male earnings ratio has improved over time, it has hovered in the 83% range for almost 20 years. This elephant, it isn't picky. It affects women in the workplace regardless of age, profession, or level within the organization. And you know what? This elephant ain't gonna budge on its own. Now, I know that's not good grammar, but it sounds pretty good. And since it's not gonna budge, we're going to have to give it a shove. To emerge victorious over the gender pay gap, passive resistance just won't work. It's going to take active assistance to get this elephant out of your territory. I have spelled this out in my ebook, Underpaid, the number one challenge women face in the workplace. If you haven't done so already, just click the link in the description below to download your own personal copy. In it, I discuss the state of pay for women in the workplace, the state of pay for women who lead in the workplace, and a section for you to determine your state of pay. Plus, I added a bonus section on how to emerge victorious over this elephant in the room. The bonus section I will discuss at a later time in the future in more detail. But for now, let's focus on step one, because the first step in closing your gender pay gap is first determining if you even have one, and if so, how much it is. I can talk about female to male earnings ratios, averages, and how women in general are impacted by the general gender pay gap. But to be specific, you have to determine if you are trapped in the gender pay gap. And to do that, you will need to gather some information. In last week's episode, I mentioned 3 things you will need to complete this step. They are 1, your pay grade or your job grade. 2 will be your pay range or your pay scale for your job. And then number 3 is your current salary. And we're going to annualize that so we can calculate it on an annual basis. Now, you may be asking, why these 3 things? Well, I'm glad you asked. You will use this information to compare what you currently earn relative to your pay range. Now, during my days in paper manufacturing, I was selected for our company's pay and performance task force. I, along with approximately 12 colleagues from across the company, were charged with reviewing the current pay structure and making recommendations for improvement. I learned so much from that experience. I don't have time to share it all here, but in a nutshell, during that experience, I learned about the ins and outs of our compensation system. And I even had an opportunity to participate in the presentation to our board of directors. Now, from that experience and from my experience in corporate, there's something you should know. Every job or position in your organization is assigned a number or a rating. It can be numerical or it can be an alpha, but it is used to identify pay grades. Secondly, every job or pay grade in your organization is assigned a pay range. That range has a minimum and a maximum. Another name for pay range is also could be called a pay scale. So with your job or pay grade, your job or pay scale, and your current salary, those three things, you can complete the next step. Now, of the three things that I listed, you may not be privy to your job or pay range. If you don't know the pay range for your current position, your supervisor or human resources representative can help you locate it. There's a move afoot in many states for increased pay transparency, and some companies are following suit by publicizing pay ranges for jobs within the organization. And your company may be one of those. Now, some supervisors and HR representatives may be reluctant to give you this information, but it should not be a problem since it relates to your current position. If you get resistance, just drop me a note. Perhaps I can offer some tips for navigating through the situation. So now that you know your pay range, you can calculate what you are earning relative to your position in the range. Now, if this seems tedious, it's for a reason. The CPA and auditor in me like approaching things in a systematic way, following a process that points to the next step and the next and the next. Now, were you thinking that step 2 will be to talk to your boss or supervisor? No, not just yet. We're going to hold off on that for a second. Now that you know what you're earning relative to your position in the range, in step 2, you can calculate your pay gap. Now, this can be tricky, and some say that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But when it comes to pay, it's important to be as objective as possible, to base your case on objective measures. Now, based on your experience and demonstrated ability or performance, what should you be earning in your current position? For example, if you are being paid below the minimum for your job or pay grade, that's usually a no-brainer. You're being underpaid. But what if you're closer to the middle? Based on your experience and demonstrated ability, in other words, what you're bringing to the table, what should your salary be? Now, keep this in mind. No one can pay you what you're worth because you are priceless, but they can pay you what your contribution is worth. So it is important that you can measure what your contributions are worth. Now, we've covered quite a bit of ground today. I walked you through what you'll need to determine what you currently earn relative to your pay range. And then I discussed how to determine how your pay compares to your experience and demonstrated ability, or in other words, your performance. Now, my ebook, Underpaid, the number one challenge women face in the workplace, lays it out step by step. Just click the link in the description below. Now, on the next episode, I will share more information on how to use the bonus section of my ebook. So if you want to get ahead of the game, you can check it out before time. Now, your head may be spinning, but I don't want to make you dizzy. My goal is to get you to thinking about how to emerge victorious over this elephant in the room, namely the gender pay gap. Bottom line, I do not want you to be uninformed about the gender pay gap, nor do I want you to be uninformed about how to get out. Because since you work so hard for your money, you might as well take home all of it. Now, I hope you will join me next time as I disclose the next step you can take to emerge victorious over this elephant named the gender pay gap. And if you found this information helpful, would you please do me a huge favor? Would you please share this with another woman in the workplace who may be trapped in the gap, you will be helping me spread the word and fulfill my mission of leaving each person and place better than I found them. I do thank you so very much for listening, and I hope you will join me next Wednesday at noon Central Time for the next episode of Zap the Gender Pay Gap. Until next time, be well.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of Zap the Gender Pay Gap. Please rate, review, and subscribe to or follow me wherever you get your favorite podcast. I am your host, Gwendolyn Tucker. Thanks so much for listening. See you next time.